The architect's error cost the city $90 million, and due to a poor contractor, the construction and operation costs of the tunnel skyrocketed. Today you will learn how a project development error led to $1 billion increase in airport construction costs, how a lack of engineering knowledge caused an entire bridge to collapse, and how negligence and corruption resulted in one of the world's most horrific tragedies. Enjoy watching. Tacoma Narrows Bridge. You've probably heard the phrase that you need to learn from your mistakes. However, there are problems that no one has ever encountered before. This is the path that all scientists and engineers take when inventing or discovering something new. In the case of designing a bridge in the United States over the Tacoma Narrows, the engineer-designers made a fatal mistake. The idea to build the bridge was born back in 1889, and actual construction began in 1938. Construction was completed 19 months later in 1940. The bridge was a suspension bridge 1,810 meters long, with just 2 lanes, one in each direction. Why so few lanes? It was all about cost savings, with a construction budget of about $8 million. Issues with the bridge began to arise during its construction. The problem was its stability. Even in light winds, it started to shake and vibrate. Of course, they tried to address this deficiency both during and after construction, but the level of knowledge of the designers and engineers at the time didn't allow them to do so. As a result, almost 6 months later, on November 7, 1940, something that no one expected occurred. When the wind in the bridge's vicinity reached about 60 km per hour, something incredible happened on the bridge. Due to the strong wind, the bridge deck began to not only vibrate but even sway and twist with a huge deflection. An hour after the wind intensified, the bridge could not withstand it and collapsed. Fortunately, no one was harmed. The driver of the only car left on the bridge managed to escape in time. Unfortunately, his dog, frightened by what was happening, remained inside the car and sadly perished when the vehicle fell into the river. The moment of the disaster was captured on video, allowing scientists to gather even more information about the incident and draw the right conclusions. The bridge was eventually rebuilt and made resilient to such strong winds. Overall, the engineer's mistake cost tens of millions of dollars. Millennium Bridge. In 2000, another bridge was opened in the United Kingdom, but this time it was a pedestrian bridge. Architects prepared an interesting design project. However, as with the American car bridge, there were significant errors in the design. Specifically, when creating the bridge, it was not taken into account that a massive number of people could be on it at the same time. The opening of the bridge was attended by Queen Elizabeth II and over 90,000 spectators. When visitors were allowed onto the bridge, a large crowd of over 2,000 people gathered in no time. It was at this moment that a terrible engineering miscalculation was discovered. Resonance phenomena similar to those on the Tacoma Bridge began to occur on the bridge. All of this led to significant swaying. Some people felt unwell, while some even fainted. The government immediately took action to solve the problem, limiting the number of people allowed on the bridge at one time. This decision, of course, resulted in enormous queues. Naturally, such a solution was far from ideal, and ultimately the bridge was closed just 2 days after opening. During the time the bridge remained inactive, engineers tried to figure out how to solve the problem. Only in 2002, after thorough checks, was the bridge reopened. In those 2 years, the designers devised a solution using special dampers that reduce the oscillatory motions of the bridge, ultimately resolving the problem. Firestone Tires. One of the deadliest errors was made by engineers at the Firestone Company, a manufacturer of automobile tires in the 2000s. During this time, the Ford Motor Company was developing its new car called the Explorer. The car turned out to have inherent flaws from the design stage. Ford didn't want to address this issue at a technical level, which led them to use tires that would improve the car's stability on the road. At that time, there were certain agreements between the automotive giant and the Firestone Company, allowing the latter to supply tires for the new Ford Explorer. However, this company made a fatal mistake in its development. The new tires had a significant flaw. The tread would simply separate from the tire when driven at speed. The issue arose because Ford had requested the development of a tire to be used with reduced pressure, which significantly increased the load on the tire. As a result of Firestone engineers' oversight, around 14 million tires had to be recalled. By the time the decision was made, poor quality tires had already caused 271 deaths and injured nearly 800 people. The scandal following the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's investigation into frequent incidents involving the new Ford Explorer led to the end of the partnership between the two brands and the resignation of the CEOs of both companies. The exact financial losses resulting from this error are impossible to calculate, but they certainly amount to hundreds of millions of dollars. In our next example, no one was harmed, but it was sheer luck. Hartford Civic Center. January 18, 1978, almost turned into a day of mourning for the city of Hartford. On this ordinary winter day, a disaster struck at the Hartford Civic Center Stadium. Interestingly, the spectators had left the building several hours before the incident. So what happened? The stadium's roof collapsed under the weight of the snow. But how could this happen? The blame lay with the errors of the engineering designers. At the time, the first computers that aided in calculations had already appeared. There were even special software programs that helped solve many of the designers' tasks. It was precisely because of this software that the disaster occurred. During the creation of the building's design, an engineer overlooked a major error, failing to account for the additional load that could result from wet snow in the roof structural integrity assessment. Only the weight of the roof itself was considered in the calculations. And on one wonderful winter day, this error made itself known. One of the beams simply couldn't bear the weight of the roof and bent. This set off a chain reaction, causing all other load-bearing structures to fall like dominoes. Within a couple of minutes, the entire stadium was destroyed. It's needless to say that the cost of such an error was enormous, amounting to around $90 million. This is how simple negligence can lead to significant problems. Big Dig Tunnel. Problems with the Big Tunnel began from the very start. During its construction, numerous errors were made, costing the state a vast amount of money. For instance, when building the most expensive project in US history, the contractor simply used substandard concrete. After some time following the tunnel's opening, cracks began to appear, and there were increasing water intrusions. Electrical failures even occurred. All these problems stemming from the contractor's negligence cost the state an enormous sum. Each day of the tunnel construction cost around $3 million, and the total budget amounted to about $14 million. Unfortunately, these significant expenses were not the end of the story. On July 10, 2006, a true catastrophe occurred in the tunnel, claiming the life of one woman. Right in the middle of traffic, a 25-ton ceiling panel fell into a car. This tragedy happened due to the same negligence on the part of the unscrupulous contractor. Let's hope that such a disaster won't occur again. Sampoon shopping center collapse. The most extensive tragedy in a collapsed building prior to the September 11th attacks was the Sampoon shopping center collapse in South Korea. On that dreadful day, 502 people lost their lives, and 937 were injured due to construction violations. In anticipation of the 1988 Olympics in Seoul, there was a significant construction boom. All the projects were managed by local companies since the government had imposed a ban on international construction contracts. Construction of various structures occurred within tight deadlines due to the high number of orders for contractors. Initially, the building project was planned as a 4-story residential complex, but during construction, due to a corrupt deal between the future director and the local administration, it was decided to build a shopping center. As a result of changes in usage conditions, several support columns were removed from the construction plan to make way for an escalator, and an additional 5th floor was added. Naturally, the contractor refused to make these changes, leading the future director to fire them and complete the construction with his own construction company. The unscrupulous director and his company didn't stop at just those project alterations. They reduced the diameter of 8 out of 20 supporting columns, increased the distance between them, and halved the number of reinforcing bars inside the supporting columns. The roof's thickness was increased by 1.5 times, and the 5th floor slab, due to the use of heated floors, further increased the load on the floor below. As a result of all these changes in the building structure, the load it had to bear doubled. In addition to the increased load, the load-bearing capacity of the columns was reduced by over 20%. Naturally, with such errors, the building couldn't withstand the load, leading to the catastrophe. There were some warning signs leading up to the disaster. In 1994, a bank branch was relocated from the 2nd floor to the 1st, and a bookstore opened in its place. Due to the weight of the bookshelves, cracks began to appear in the lobby. A year later, the store closed, but the growth of the cracks continued. On the day of the disaster, the shopping center's director attempted to address the issue and even convened an emergency meeting. He did this after receiving reports from the 5th floor that the floor had sagged and the ceiling had dropped slightly. During the inspection, a massive crack was found in a support column, and water was dripping from the ceiling. The shopping center's management refused to believe in the severity of the situation. When the question of evacuating all visitors came up during the meeting, it was immediately dismissed. One engineer suggested that repair work could still be carried out, even without closing the center. Needless to say, this was a fatal mistake. That evening, a collapse occurred, claiming the lives of many innocent people. By the way, the management never gave the order to evacuate visitors. It was the center's employees who did so just minutes before the collapse. Ville-Marie Tunnel, Montreal. Another incident involving a tunnel that fortunately didn't result in any casualties. On August 1, 2011, in the city of Montreal, a significant incident occurred and luckily no one was harmed. In the Ville-Marie Tunnel, a concrete ceiling structure collapsed. Fortunately, at that time there were no vehicles on the road. Naturally, after the collapse, traffic in both directions was immediately blocked. The ceiling debris was cleared overnight, and traffic was restored fairly quickly. By the way, these concrete structures on the ceiling were designed to assist drivers. It was intended that they would help a person's eyes adjust to the darkness of the tunnel. The exact cause of the incident is not entirely clear, but most likely it was the result of mistakes made by engineers who didn't consider several important factors leading to the collapse. 20 Fenchurch Street. Fortunately, not all architectural mistakes lead to horrifying consequences. In the design of the skyscraper at 20 Fenchurch Street, an oversight occurred. The building has a concave wall, causing its glass facade to create the effect of a massive lens. During sunny weather, the temperature around the building rises much higher than usual. Due to temperature fluctuations and the building's unique shape, air vortices are formed near it, and they're powerful enough to knock some people off their feet. This structural feature couldn't help but attract public attention. In nearby buildings, temperature on sunny days rose so dramatically that the whole world heard about this marvelous building. Some plastic parts and cars even melted. One journalist even managed to fry an egg on one of the sunbeams reflected from the building. Naturally, once the issue became public, attempts were made to rectify the mistake. Temporary boards were installed to block the sunlight, and eventually a permanent awning was put in place. The exact cost of the error is unknown, but according to some information, the building's designers had to pay around $1,000 for the repair of a car that melted due to the reflection from this building. Berlin-Brandenburg Airport. Berlin-Brandenburg Airport can be considered one of the most expensive construction projects in Germany. Discussions about the need for a new airport in the capital began immediately after the country's reunification in 1989. It was envisioned that this new airport would become the primary one. The company responsible for this grand project was founded in 1991. In 1993, the search for the land for the future construction began, and by 1996, the site was chosen. By that time, the construction site had already been legally designated. However, the construction permit was only obtained in 2004. The plan was to upgrade the existing Schönefeld Airport to international standards. Private investors were supposed to manage the future facility, but privatizing it didn't work out. The beginning of the construction can be traced back to 2006, when the ceremony for laying the first stone in the foundation was held. By 2009, the construction cost had already reached $2.8 billion. It goes without saying that the initial estimate was way off and the budget was greatly exceeded. The airport became significantly more expensive due to the necessity of soundproofing nearby homes. The airport's opening was planned for both 2011 and 2013. By 2012, the construction cost had exceeded €4 billion. The constant delays were related to errors in construction financing, the design of fire safety systems, and numerous other minor shortcomings. Because of this, the construction cost increased from the initial €1.7 billion to a whopping €5.5 billion. The primary reason cited was an error in creating the fire safety system, which the Commission simply couldn't accept. Why did it happen? Most likely it was due to corruption and poor execution of their duties by the project's leaders. In the end, the airport only opened in 2020, 9 years after the initially planned date. Today you've learned about the most horrifying and costly mistakes made by engineers. Thanks for watching.